Hey everybody, I thought I would make a video just basically describing how the heck I got to be doing food challenges at this point in time in my life and also the why associated with it. So for as long as I can remember, even when I was a kid, I was able to eat a lot and got feedback along the way, even as a child, about how much I could eat, at one sitting. And as I grew older, basically, I kept getting the same feedback from others whenever, I'd eat at a restaurant or with others or even just family associated with it. And so about 1979, I started bodybuilding, and mainly for the reason for sports. And associated with that, obviously, is eating, which I had no clue about, and they really didn't cover it back to any large degree. And the only information you had was to go from the muscle mags at the time, and diet wasn't a primary thing to be covered. It was basically training associated with it. So I started bodybuilding to get stronger for sports back in 1979, and then when I graduated from high school, along the way I got hooked on powerlifting and graduated from high school and started powerlifting from about 1981 to approximately 1992. And back then, nutrition and eating was, I had no clue. Again, I had no idea how many calories I was taking in at the time. All I knew back then was to get at least 1 gram per pound of body weight protein from that perspective. And so I competed for that period of time, and again had no clue about how many calories. In retrospect, I competed in the 198 pound class, and in retrospect I could have competed in probably the 181 and 3/4 pound class if I have it correct back then, if I knew anything about how to eat and diet from that perspective. So let me just throw up basically me. My best lift, I competed in drug-free powerlifting at the time, and my best lift was a 600 pound deadlift in the 198 pound class. Along the way, I was always hungry and had an appetite that was really hard to feel full from that perspective. And I really didn't understand that, and really just kind of went with it, and it helped me gain a lot of mass per se. Again, my body fat level was not, I wasn't at a higher body fat level, but I could have run, if I knew anything about nutrition at the time and how to eat, I could have run around at a lower body fat per se, because it was pretty much anything and everything. I remember back as a kid, warping back to a kid again, eating literally a gallon of ice cream or gallons of ice cream is a side thing to eat, in a week from that perspective. So we started along the way. So what had happened is as I stopped competing, and again, as I got older and didn't have any clue about how many calories I was taking in, I was eating too many calories basically, and it got to the point where I'm 5'9". It got to the point where I was about 225, and at the time you see a bunch of videos from Disney where our family is rabid Disney fans from that perspective, and so Disney had all-you-can-eat buffets, which is what I did back in the day years ago when I was a lot younger as well. I remember one trip I put on 18 pounds. Yeah, 18 pounds. I weighed myself before and after. And it was basically a free-for-all from that standpoint. Part of it is I'm cheap, and so Disney is not cheap per se for buffets, and so I want to get my money's worth. I decided basically I was 40 years old. I needed to do a transformation. I basically got too fat period from my perspective. So here's my initial. I basically just started eating healthier from that standpoint and not eating as much. Again, I really didn't have a really good clue about macros, how, what I was eating. It tended to be the normal broccoli and chicken type of diet in order to make this first transformation that I'll show up now. And that works. The problem is that you can't sustain that, and so I ran into that problem as well. I mean, that's the key for weight. Everybody can lose weight by just cutting calories. The key is whether you can keep the weight off forevermore. And in order to do that, you really have to change how you eat and learn about food, which is, I always recommend to people, you need to learn about food, period, before you even think about entering the gym. And as part of that, the reason I did this transformation at 40 is both my parents have high blood pressure and high cholesterol. So I knew that those genetics were potentially right around the corner. And right after 40, I basically started doing these cheat days, and soon degraded into I was eating during the week so that I could basically binge eat on Friday, that then turned into Saturday somewhat, and Sunday as well. And pretty soon, I ended up looking like, after my 40s, in my being 40 years old transformation, I ended up looking like this as a byproduct of doing that. And again, I did not change how I really ate overall, period, from that standpoint. So one of the things I did mention as a kid, I had, in all along the way, I've had a really huge appetite. And so throwing in a lesson learned about learning about food is I'm not one of those people that can just have a little bit of something. So I've got to be able to sustain what I eat every day, and I can't just have like a half a cookie or a half a piece of cheesecake or something like that, or one piece of pizza. That just doesn't work for me, and it doesn't work for a lot of people, and I've recognized that. And that's one of the keys for me to be able to keep basically my physique at this point, and I'm now 58, is to understand that I'm an all-in or nothing person with respect to food from that standpoint. I'm going to get into later, however, being able to satisfy with the diet that I evolved to, being able to satisfy my hunger and be able to keep my current physique as well. And we'll get there on the food challenges. So one of the things, I guess we'll just go right to my transformation at 50, and we'll put that up here. My transformation at 50 years old, and you can see the before and after actually was substantial from that standpoint. I learned a lot about food, and it still comes down to calories in versus calories burned. I don't care what anybody says, it's just my opinion, whether it's keto, intermittent fasting, whatever, and hormonal or whatever, insulin and all these different arguments and everything, it still comes down to foundationally, which is what I abide by today is calories in versus calories burned. So one of the things I'm going to get into, actually I have a little list of what I'm going to talk about here. I'm going to get into eating disorders. So in bodybuilding fitness, what's not talked about, is the eating disorders that people have. And a lot of, there's one specifically is people binge eat. And what I had noticed, obviously I was still a bodybuilding fan, following bodybuilding, so these 10,000 calorie challenges were going on. I had already done my transformation at 50 years old, so I knew it was not something you can do very often, even if you were to attempt it, okay? And yes, that it was basically a binge. Okay, and I had a tendency to already do that was in my past, as I mentioned before, where I would be super strict the whole week, and then I basically would binge on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, especially Friday to a large degree, and eat probably 10,000 calories. And this whole binge issue is something, again, that's kind of put under the rug, so to speak. And so I started looking at these 10,000 calorie challenges, and as a part of that on YouTube were basically food challenges, and whether it's pro eaters or YouTubers that basically go around and do these eating challenges. And I knew I could eat a lot. It took a lot to satisfy my appetite. And along the way, I've learned, if you've not heard of Greg Doucette, you should look him up on YouTube. I had already learned before Greg ever came out with his cookbook that I have to be able to eat foods that are going to fill me up and satiate me, but not be a bazillion calories. Okay, so and that means vegetables, and a lot of vegetables. That means some fruits. and obviously lean protein is a part of that. And then along the way, with just more healthy eating, there's been several food hacks associated with me being able to eat a lot of food and yet feel satisfied but not taking in bazillion calories. And so I had already gone along that path and was doing experimenting, and I love to experiment, which is why I also do food challenges or eating. I've started to do these eating challenges per se. Is I love the challenge of keeping my current physique as it is right now and being able to do these eating challenges along the way. And the other key element is not only keeping my physique at 58, but also keeping, which I do, I keep my cholesterol and my blood pressure in check. And yes, they'd be sky high probably if I just ate and was overweight and everything. And I train, I still train. I love to train, so that's a piece of it. But you're never going to out-train a poor diet from that perspective. So I love the experimentation of the whole process and being able to. The other thing is I've been drug-free from the get-go. So one of my goals have now changed. Before, when I was younger, was to get as strong and big as possible, obviously. So I never did PEDs. I don't do TRT right now, and I don't do any over-the-counter drugs either from that perspective, whether it's for pain or whatever. So that's a piece of the whole thing of doing the eating challenges as well. I guess part of being competitive. I'm a competitive person. That's really part of the whole deal, is keeping my health in check and my physique in check, yet being able to, again, basically all I did is, getting back to food, eating challenges, is I was already eating a certain way, and all I needed to do to train for these challenges, I had a natural genetic propensity to be able to eat a lot and drink a lot, period, as I mentioned very early in this video. So all I did is start increasing the quantity when I'd ever do some training, which is, again, healthy vegetables, some of the no-carb pastas that are out, and obviously lean protein as part of that. All I did is basically increase the amounts, whenever I do a training session from that standpoint. So what you see on my eating challenges, there's no trickery at the end from that standpoint. And on the latest one, for example, I did learn a lesson, which is I'm never going to push to the point where I'm pushing my ultimate capacity, because I did that last BOMA challenge that was in there at dinner. I paid for that after, and that wasn't fun. And that's the other thing, is I think it's fun. Again, I'm a really competitive person, so I think it's super fun, and I love to do it with family. I've also found doing it alone is kind of a hollow thing to do without family there. So it's fun to go to different restaurants that we've never been before and do some of these eating challenges. So as far as current state, here is a photo taken probably a couple weeks ago in the whole goon lighting at the gym. I'll put that up basically, and so again, that's my goal. And one last thing about what you watch on YouTube, you have to be careful what you watch on YouTube and what's going on, especially with respect to these eating challenges. One of my people I love to watch is Randy Santel, and he has done a lot of food challenges. He's arguably the greatest of all time, and if you notice, he got up to 350 pounds, and for example, in his case, when he's doing these back-to-back food challenges, I want to talk about calories in versus calories burned. There is no way someone's going to be eating 15 to 20 pounds. Randy, as you saw, gained weight over time. I don't care what anybody, there's no way you're going to out-exercise it, with maybe the one exception would be Eric the Electric, when he's basically doing hundreds of miles of running and biking a week. But anyone else, just look at with a grain of salt, because at some point they're going to have to either diet hard after a short period of time if they're doing these food challenges, especially if they're putting in 10, 15 pounds of food in high calorie dense food that's going to be bazillion calories. They either have to go on some sort of crash diet either before or after, or there's something else going on from that perspective. So Again, just be careful. Again, I do know that there's, so if you're interested in doing an eating challenge, I do know there's some dangerous practices. I read on Randy Santel's site, and I think a couple, I guess I've known that some people have used the water training technique, which is really not a safe technique and can be dangerous from that standpoint if you're interested in doing eating challenges. So that's basically it. And so now you know how the heck I ended up doing eating challenges, especially at 58 years old. And will I continue to do these? That's the other thing you'll note, is there's no way I'm going to be doing, it's not healthy to do back to back food challenges, that's for sure. And this is just something, again, if you call it, I have to eat anyway, and I was already eating to be full. Again, low calorie, high fiber, nutrient dense foods, you're able to eat a lot more. And there's, if you just search that in Google, I'm sure you'll find lots of really good low calorie, high nutrient dense and high fiber foods that make you feel satiated. So again, that's the trick, is keeping the weight off, you know, over your lifestyle, or over your lifetime basically. And everybody can lose weight. So, and yeah, again, it seems pretty counterproductive in general, which is why I wanted to put this video out. No one really talks about some of this stuff, and you just never hear anybody really talk about what goes on and literally how to do it. And hopefully in the future, I'm also going to show you, there's only just a couple of them. You have to ask that question, why there isn't more videos of people that do these eating challenges, especially at the top training. There's some, obviously, Nathan hot dog training videos, but a couple, basically, maybe 2 or 3 out of all these bazillion videos that are put out by people that do eating challenges about how they train. And hopefully I'm going to share a video basically about how I at least train as a complete amateur and noob. One final thing that came to mind, always remember genetics are associated with anything that you do. Okay, genetics are king. So not anybody can just be a professional bodybuilder, and the same thing still applies to anything. Not everybody can be a doctor, for example, okay? And so with respect to eating, the same thing applies. There's a genetic ability, and not everybody could be a pro eater from that perspective. So I've recognized that, you know, I'm probably already topped out from that standpoint unless I do something radical, which is not something I want to do. My capacity is something where, for most reasonable food challenges, you know, notice some of the quote professionals that do this for a living are doubling food challenges that are out there at some of the restaurants. I know it's not something that again I want to do going forward in as far as my genetics go, and that my genetics are limited from that perspective. So keep that in mind as well when you watch people, if they're down in 15 pounds of food in 40 minutes or whatever like that, again, genetics is king with respect to everything we do. So that's it. I hope it helps shed some light as to why the heck I'm doing these eating challenges and why, and also some other information you may find useful. Thanks.